Hey guys, welcome to Tall Tales with Taco. Wherever you may be in this world, I've got an exciting night tonight. This is going to be a great interview. Tonight we've got Ric Prado, and he wrote this book recently, Black Ops. And thanks to my dear friend Susan over at Soldier of Fortune, Susan Keating. Um, I've got this interview lined up, and I'm excited because usually you want to read the book and then you can talk in depth with the author. This guy is one of the most incredibly humble, yet has seen more stuff guy that you'll ever meet. So without further ado, I'd like to bring Ric on. Ric, I'll move you around to the other side there. Now it looks like I'm looking right at you. I tell you what, thank you so much, sir, for coming out here because I really can't. It's an understatement to say that you, in terms of, I'm a little bit nervous in terms of talking to a guy with the level of experience and stuff that you've done. I'm humbled. I mean, everybody needs to read this book. So,
Well, I appreciate the courtesy and the kind words. You mentioned the word humble, and that is probably the biggest goal that I've always had in my life. But there's a reason for that. It isn't that I am, mystic or anything else. It's just that I was always surrounded by individuals that to this day I'm in awe of. The Billy Waws of the world, the pararescue Wayne's Fisk, Dewey Claridge, all these guys that go for black, all these people that I grew up around. I walked in the shadow of giants for all those years, so it's easy staying humble. Oh yeah, I got
yeah,
for those there.
yeah. Well, go back, because you started your origins in Cuba, and your parents came to the U.S. and your your trip over to the U.S. wasn't easy by any standards in terms of being separated and all that. Um, talk about that.
Yeah, I was a happy-go-lucky kid. I was probably about 8 years old when the Castro revolution came to fruition. And, middle class. My dad had a coffee roasting company. He was a cowboy for my grandfather's ranch before he got married. My mom domesticated him a bit because he was a pretty wild guy. And but when the impact of communism via Castro was almost immediate.
Yeah.
Here I was happy with my horse and my bicycle and all this other stuff, and all of a sudden I'm wearing a little uniform to school and being sent to the camps to educate illiterate peasants on how to. I was 9 years old. You can imagine how this stuff went.
Yeah.
So Dad got disillusioned with it about 6 months after after Castro took over. They confiscated his business. 6 months after that, the business closed because my dad had built every machine in there by himself. Nobody else knew how to fix them. Yeah. So we decided to come out, but unfortunately, my mom and my dad could not get out. And the reason for that was when you registered to leave Cuba, you had everything you had was confiscated. Inventories were taken, and before you could get on that plane, everything had to be there according to the inventory. So they were fighting over my dad's 57 Pontiac. The chief of police wanted that. And then he had a Jeep and a deuce and a half for work. And, so it was a very sad story. We were in Havana for a little over a year trying to get out. And then out of desperation, my dad sent me out solo via a Catholic church program called Peter Pan. 14,000 plus kids like me left at that time. Some fared better, some fared well, so I landed in the U.S. I was still turned 11 at the orphanage because I went from a camp in Florida for 2 weeks and then to an orphanage in Pueblo, Colorado. And
wow, that's a change.
Yep, and I turned 11 there, and I will tell you that it was a quick way of growing up.
You didn't speak English either.
Not a word. That was one of the biggest things with the orphanage. As rough as it was, and it was a pretty rough place. I mean, you got 3 or 4 different cultures and languages, and a lot of pissed off kids because who the hell wants to be in an orphan, right? So
right.
But the one thing that I learned was to play baseball and English. I was immersed in English every single day, classes for hours and hours of C-spot run. That helped me tremendously, especially when I was able to reunite with my parents and I was actually able to facilitate some conversations for them, as basic as they were.
Oh, that is crazy. Um, and so now your parents, how did they actually get away? How did they finally get out of there?
They eventually got their exit visas. We all had visas from the United States. That wasn't the problem because we were, refugees from a communist regime. So that's a no-brainer. So it was a legal process it was leaving Cuba, getting that exit permit that was holding him back. I know my dad spread some money around because corruption is corruption. So he eventually got everything settled and guess it was a little over 8 months later, we finally reunited in South Florida.
See, what I love about this, reading the book, it doesn't matter who you are. It's your work ethic and what you're willing to do. And your mom and dad, again, hit, they have nothing. You guys lived pretty sparse and worked your way right back up into society and, doing well. It's just
my dad, who was a good businessman. My dad was a good businessman, but primarily he was a craftsman. My dad could build anything, especially woodwork. He was an artist. He was an artisan. And but when we first came to this country, it was 6 of us living in a 1-bedroom efficiency because my two cousins and aunt were living with us. My dad mowed lawns and loaded trucks. Moving vans and all that other stuff. My mom went to work at a sweatshop. She did that for almost 2 decades. But 4 years later, we bought our first little house in Hialeah. So, yep, the American dream.
Now, how did you pick PJs of all things?
Talk
about that because this is on the tail of the Vietnam War, and you're down in South Florida. PJs is such a when you talk about on grand scale, Navy SEALs, Delta, Rangers, Recon, PJs, it's such a absolute elite, tiny group. How'd you get into that?
Yeah. First of all, it's funny because I have this great poster that has got some guys from the Army saying, "Hey, please take back all the jokes." Air Force jokes. Just send in combat controllers for close air support and pararescue to get us the hell out of here. I was. What happened was I had started junior college in Miami-Dade, and first semester. This was the hippie years. This is 1970-ish, 71, early 71, and the hippies announced that they were going to take down the American flag and burn it. And I said to myself, that ain't gonna happen. I didn't know anybody in college, so I went back to my homies. I was a little rough around the edges in high school, or so I'm told. So I called a couple of my homies. 4 of them showed up. So it was 5 of us and about 16 or 20 hippies, and it wasn't a fair fight for them. But the tipping point was, and this may sound melodramatic, but it's the truth. I looked up and I saw that American flag. And for the first time in my life, I was very proud to have done violence.
Yeah.
And now my draft number was, 3,000 or whatever. I wasn't going to get called, let's put it that way. A, I was in college, and B, I had a really number. So my parents were not very happy when they found out that at the last minute that I had joined pararescue. Now, what happened was I wanted to be a marine science technician. That was one of the things that I was going to do professionally, at least at first. Been scuba diving since I was a freshman in high school. Uh-huh. And in my class, an oceanography class, I sat next to this guy named Glenn Richardson. We hit it off, and one day he showed up in a really good-looking flight jacket, and I said, "Glenn, where'd you buy that?" He says, "I didn't buy it, I earned it." And he was PJ. He was with the reserves there in 301st. So that's how I found out about pararescue. To tell you the truth, at the time, I had only been in this country 8 years, 8 or 9 years. And I did not know the difference between Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines. I didn't. But when he started showing me pictures of jumping out of airplanes, climbing mountains, scuba diving, and shooting guns and wearing a cool hat. I'm more like, man, sign me up. So that's how pararescue came. I'm very glad. I will tell you, indefinitely that I would have never had the career and the life that I had if I had not joined pararescue.
Oh, sure, sure. Well, did you go direct into the Air Force as a PJ, or did you just join the Air Force and then apply?
Yeah, well, you could test before, and I applied for pararescue, which is part of the Air Force, and but that all that gets you is a tryout.
Mm-hmm.
Tryout to see if you make preconditioning, which is now they call it Indoc, which is 6 weeks of doing nothing but PT and getting drowned and all this kind of stuff. So that's all that it guarantees you is it's a ticket entry into the pipeline if you pass. And that's yeah. So it was a good challenge. I thought I was a tough guy until I got to pararescue.
Humbled a little bit, yeah.
Oh,
Just
not more a little bit. After I puked about 3 days straight, I figured I had to cowboying up to do. So
well, I'd ask you to show me your Jolly Green tattoo. I know you got one somewhere.
oh yeah, I do.
We'll have to be like Forrest Gump. I'd like to see that someday, you know. So
Yeah, I had one done, and being a smart ass, what I have is the toes come out of the top of my bathing suit. So if I'm at the beach, you have the shorts and these, the toes, green toes coming out of my butt. Yeah, yeah.
and for those that don't know, if somebody claims to be a PJ, all you got to do is say, "Show me your feet," and they've got a set of the Jolly Green Giant feet, the big green feet from the old, that I guess the old commercial. The It had the outline of the feet, and they've got it tattooed on their ass, and
Yeah.
so that's kind of like a secret handshake deal.
Yeah, there's a very
Identify.
strong story to that also because my biggest mentor in pararescue was a guy named Wayne Fisk. To this day, he's my best friend. He's been a mentor of mine since for 50 years,
Right.
and he was the first PJ in Vietnam to do the tattoo on his ass. Him and the guy Chuck Morrow he was the number two. And if you Google Wayne Fisk, Chief Master Sergeant Wayne Fisk by pararescue, legendary guy, Sante Raid, Mayaguez, Four Tours, every Silver Stars and stuff that you could get. But yeah, he's the original, and he happened to be the head of the instructors in our final phase, and we became friends even then and remained.
Oh, that is so cool. And I take it he's probably gone by now.
Well, he's out of pararescue. He's alive and well. He's
Oh, is he alive and working well? Okay, good, good, good. He hadn't passed on.
77, 78, still ramrod straight, and still not a guy I would want to mess with.
Yeah. Well, so you go into PJs. You do that for active for what, 2 years,
That's right.
and then your buddy pulls you back into the 301st, so you get to do part-time, best of both worlds, right? You get to do some part-time stuff, and then you also become a fireman, right?
Yeah, I was a paramedic with the fire department there. I mean, I was a firefighter. I went through the whole college, and I fought a bunch of fires. But primarily, it was when pararescue. I'm sorry, when Metro Dade Rescue was being started, and the usual Prado luck, the captain in the fire department for rescue was a PJ, and he was at the 304, and he's the one that recruited me. He said, "You got to try out for the fire department," And again, I did that for 6 years, and you figure late 70s in Miami.
Yeah.
I got pretty good at being an EMT too. I patched up a lot of people, saved a few, and like always, we lose a few. But yeah.
Well, what I love is how do you become? You worked for the CIA, so how do you become? How do you get recruited into the CIA? I know you applied, but I love the story of you going out on a debt somewhere.
Yeah.
Little
Yeah.
did you know that was going to be your test. maybe?
Well, it's funny. I believe that if you dream your dream and you follow your path and you are willing to pay the price of admission, that dream eventually becomes true. I always wanted to be that kind of guy. This was why pararescue was so cool, because everything that we did was cool stuff that was transferable, right? And
Yeah.
I applied in 1974, which is when I started the reserves. More of the reserves, and they turned me down. They said, "Look, we're firing people. We're not hiring." I didn't get my beret until December of 72. So by 73, Vietnam was a non-starter. I wasn't going to get a shot at it. So
Yeah.
I applied to the agency. They turned me down, and then again. I guess it was like around 1980, early 1980, I reapplied. Now I had a lot of, a rescue experience because I've been doing Metro-Dade in South Florida for 6 years. And they called me in on contract to be the medic on exercises for our special activities division ground branch. Yeah, the first thing they sent me on was as one of the instructors and medic at a desert survival school in Arizona.
Right.
And I did all right. I did well. And when Reagan took over in 1981 and declared war on communism in Latin America, he started what became the Contra program. That was his initiative. And at the time, because of the attrition that I mentioned earlier, the agency did not have a single paramilitary officer who was a native Spanish speaker and could pass for something other than American.
Yeah.
And so they called me up, and the rest is history, as they said. And the beauty of it was that I was there for 3 years, sleeping in a jungle hammock from Monday through Friday for 3 years, and loved every minute of it. But for the first 14 months of that, I was the only CIA officer allowed in the camps, because that's where the title of the book Black Ops comes from. Black Ops are for this agency. Black Ops are those missions that the American hand has to be hidden. So
Gotcha. Was it just go back? I love the pizza story because to me, that's how you got noticed, man. They're like, who the freaking hell is this Prado dude, man? He just like popped up out of nowhere.
the first thing I learned in pararescue: if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. And so what happened was that we would train the guys in medical stuff and do compass, this, that, and the other. But then at night, they would go to their place, and they were supposed to survive on their own. And sometimes we would hit them, do an ambush on them or whatever. And what they didn't know was that as soon as I sent them, we sent them out, I would literally run up on top of this small mountains, a big hill, and with my binoculars, make note of where each one of the guys were encamping. Yeah. So, here they're doing all kinds of evasion and hiding and all this other stuff. And this goddamn Prado is always finding every single one of them. and the best one was the pizza guy. They're whispering because they can't, if they get hurt, they're gonna get wrapped up. So they're whispering, man, I would kill for a pizza. And that's when I jumped out of the bushes and said, pizza delivery. And yeah.
Was it Russ that recruited you?
Yeah, Russ unfortunately passed away last year. He was a ground branch and maritime branch guy. He did a lot of maritime work in the agency. And he's the one that called me. He had met me before, not necessarily, I never worked for him, but I had met him in the ground branch experience. And when the Contra program started, he was the one that actually made the phone call and called me.
Like, I got the guy. I got the pink unicorn hair. We've got this PJ with experience and blah blah blah, and you got the call. What I love is, I mean, you become an agent, right? And they sit you down. This is what we're going to do. Did you have to go to the farm for training, or that was more later on, right?
Yeah, I went to Honduras to live on the border with Nicaragua with 2 weeks of briefings. Very little instructions. All they told me was, when you get there, there's a few guys on the ground already, senior guys, and they'll tell you what you need to do. There was no training. I was an alias. I had no alias training. They just said, "Here's your passport. Make up a signature, make up a name," and I was shipped
Out.
out there, and I was gone. But the beauty of it was, first of all, enthusiasm and dedication pays off all the time. I loved what I was doing, not only because it was cool, and not only, but you got to understand that I was helping fight the very same monster that destroyed my family and my first country.
Yeah.
And that was, people said, well, how could you do this for 3 years? You know, eating bugs out there and getting bitten and all this. I said, I never regretted a single minute of my time out there, because every time I was surrounded by mostly peasants
Mm-hmm.
who were revolutionaries, and their only ethos was God, family, in my original country. You know, it was very refreshing to spend that kind of time with those kind of people.
And so you had the Sandinistas coming across the border attacking the Contras, and you're in camp with those guys. So you're hanging out up in the mountains. Um, there was at one point I remember in the book that you had gotten extremely sick.
Yeah.
So towards the end of the 3 years that they
It,
finally.
it was, yeah, it was a little over 2 years into it. I weighed 180 pounds of no fat when I went in there. And because, again, I was living in the camps, eating in Mosquito, we ate out of banana leaves because they were cleaner than any plate that they could, wash in the stream kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I started getting some real bad stomach problems, and eventually I got medevac. And when I was medevac to Miami, the doctor that treated me said, you don't have anything that I haven't seen before. I just never seen it all in one person. I had dysentery amoebas, I had giardia, I had all kinds of other stuff. I was down 155 pounds.
Oh, geez.
And but 2 weeks later, I was back in the camps.
That's dedication right there, brother. I tell you what, because all the stuff that now did you take? I mean, as a medic, trained medic and stuff, did you bring antibiotics with you? Were you on the daily
Oh yeah,
doxycycline, or were you on Monday malaria?
we were on chloroquine for malaria, and of course, I had my medical kit with all my stuff in there because I always travel with that. I still do. And antibiotics and gamma shots every couple of weeks or a month or whatever it was, and but still, you're living in an area where leishmaniasis, mountain leprosy, was present. Malaria was a real big deal up there too. We had a lot of malaria cases, so staying healthy wasn't easy out there. Yeah,
And
very
part of
rough.
your job was you're almost. I mean, you're special forces, so you're almost like the Army special forces guys. You're living amongst all those folks
Yes.
and treating the villagers and helping them. Did you ever have to do any operations on folks?
Well, first of all, medic wise, I did at the beginning, guys who were hurt or something like that. I medevac one of my guys that got blown up, and I happened to be nearby. We were able to get him out of the camp in a helicopter, and I was first responder. But the funny thing is, the reason I was laughing is because I was the first pararescueman to set foot in C.I.A. Right?
Right.
So all these Green Berets, who to this day are dear friends of mine that were former Green Berets now with the agency, they hated my guts because I was doing what they wanted to be doing. And I said,
Right.
hey, it's not my fault you're not Latino and don't speak Spanish. You know, and it was funny because they were instrumental in my success because I had my paramilitary skills, I had the medical skills, and like I said, I didn't lack the conviction of being out there. But when I had to teach them the headspace and timing on a 50 cal, one of these guys would teach me the headspace and timing of the 50 cal. I've shot more RPGs than any other CIA officer at the time because I had to not only learn to be good with it, I had to teach it to our 10 camps.
Yeah.
So, but all of that, from the law to RPGs and all that other, I got taught that because I had no experience with that. By former Green Berets, and there was a SEAL too. Hal was one of the SEALs that was there that would prep me up, and I would go out there and teach this stuff to these guys.
And you're teaching 81 millimeters, of course, hauling 81 millimeter mortar rounds. Those aren't light. That's like 6 pounds. I remember we were humping the base plate and the mortar, and then the rounds. As young lieutenants when we were at the basic school. Yeah, that stuff's not.
We use those mostly for camp defense, although we did use them offensively. The first time that I got lit up, I was delivering those mortars to a camp that the commander's name was Suicida, which means suicidal. And he was probably one of the best commanders we had there. Unfortunately, he got killed. But Suicida, I had just driven up in the truck full of mortars or mortar rounds, and we came under fire. The Sandinistas were waiting on the other side. And you got to understand, there is no border there that, it's just, you could be in Nicaragua, you could be in Honduras in 5 minutes and back. And they started shooting at us. We shot back, and they backed off because we have pretty good firepower. But that night, I started my class with the guys, and the following night, we did a mortar attack. We leveled their camp. So that's how they got broken into mortar training.
Oh, that is so awesome! And your commander, Suicide, that was the guy that would hump the 60 and go fight with his guys with a belt-fed, M60.
He was of all the Nika commanders. Because most of them were former, Nicaraguan military, and he was the only non-commissioned officer that was a commander of a camp, and he was fearless. I mean, with a name like Suicidal, I guess you have to be, but he was just a good friend. He was just a very good friend.
And it's amazing. So that was only one of the camps you supported. How many camps did you support?
We had 10 camps. 6 of them were what we call the Spaniard side. These were, the regular Nicaraguan, and then the other was the Mosquito for the Mosquito Indians, Mosquito, Sumo, and Rama. There are 3 tribes. And
those are the guys that later on you all did the boat operations with.
Yeah.
Oh man, those guys were awesome.
They were incredible.
Something that always stuck out. You had your Walther PPK down in an ankle holster. I have a Walther PPK. That's a great weapon. I mean, accurate as hell. I always wanted one because of James Bond, and so I bought one years ago. It's a Smith & Wesson, so it's silver, but the Walther to your ankle. And you talked about, you dove with it and everything. Is that, you still have that thing? Is it still?
Well, that died, after that, those rescues that I did into Nicaraguan waters, and I jumped in. It became a rust bucket, but I have one, and as a matter of fact, if I'm using my Thunderwear, that's the pistol I can, because it's double action. There's less chance of losing my tools. So, but this Bond thing, I will admit that I read every single novel before even the movies were coming out. Because those I could check out of the library. I couldn't afford to go to the theater, but I could afford to go to the library and check out novels. And I read every single one of them. Then I watched most of the movies, not all of them. But
and your imagination's better than any screen out there. Yeah. God, that's funny. So you get to do that for a couple years, and the one thing stuck out in my mind was the photographs. You became an avid photographer at their request, but you didn't realize. Talk about that. How your photographs impacted your mission and what you're doing with the camera.
The first guy, because I was the first guy to live in the camps, I was getting a view that all they had heard was reports from the Honduran people that would visit and that. And I always carried a camera when I was out there, and I would take pictures because I would bring those back to my bosses so they could see what we needed. What the reality of the situation was. Very, very depressing the first few months going to these camps, and these kids are barely, almost naked, barefoot, with rusty AK-47s and Mausers and stuff like that, bolt-action Mausers. But what happened was, unbeknownst to me, my boss, best boss I ever had in the agency, Ray Doty, Colonel Ray was sending all this stuff back up to headquarters. So about 6 months into the program, Bill Casey, who was the DCI, and his pit bull, Dewey Claridge, who ended up being one of my mentors, I mentioned him earlier, made a black entry into Honduras to look at the program. So it was a black flight that came in. They didn't pass immigration. It was done at night and all this. So I get called out of the camps and said, "We need you to come. We need you to come back." And when I show up, my boss says, "You're going to meet the director of C.I.A." And I'm a GS-10 for God's sake, knuckle dragger PJ, and I'm going to meet the DCI. Yeah. And Louis Claridge was the one that introduced me to him and said, Mr. Director, this is your man in the camps. And he goes, "Oh, so this is Alex." I was there in Alias. I was there as Alex Mendez. Yeah. Okay. So here you have a GS-10 Cuban kid living the dream, and all of a sudden he gets to meet the DCI, and he knows your first name. So that was pretty cool. I wish I could have told my parents about it, but I couldn't. And but he said to me, he says, "Keep those photos coming, because I keep them on my desk. And when we meet with people that want to turn down these programs, yeah, that's what beat them over the head is your photographs. So keep them coming." And I did.
Oh, that's phenomenal. And you don't even realize, it's just snapping away. Hey, here we go. Let's do this. And
I was just documenting the reality. That was it. No, yeah.
Now, did you ever meet Oliver North? Did he come down there?
No, Ollie got involved in this much. I do know Ollie. As a matter of fact, we're good friends. He's a very decent individual. But I met him after the fact. After my 3 years in the camps, I went back, finished my school, went to spy school, went to the farm, and then my next assignment was Costa Rica to run the southern front. We had 3 fronts. We had the northern FDN, which were the former Somoza, leaders. We had the Mosquitoes, and then in the south we had the southern front, which were primarily former Sandinistas under Eden Pastora, who had gotten tired of what the Sandinistas were doing. They were patriots. They were just so I was sent to Costa Rica to run the program there clandestinely. Now I'm in coat and tie working out of an embassy and still running and smuggling people in and out of the country for training and operations. And when Hassan Fuss was shot down, I remember getting a phone call. I don't know if you know the story of Hassan Fuss. He was
no.
He was a former Marine. I hate to say this. He was a former Marine, but not a very good one. He was a kicker in one of the aircraft that was doing airdrops into the Contras, and his plane.
They captured him.
Well, captured is a strong word. He didn't go anywhere. The thing was his plane got hit with RPG or something. I don't remember what it was. He's the only survivor because he was the guy that had to shoot because he was the kicker. He's in the back kicking this stuff out. So he just jumped out, but he landed, pitched a hammock with his parachute, and just sat there and had a cigarette. And the Sandinistas came and took him, and he had all kinds of compromising stuff on him. He had phone books of all the contacts, the names, and everything else in his pocket. And as you know, first thing any Marine or any soldier learns is shake, rattle before you go on an op, right? You're clean.
Right.
And so when that happened, that was the beginning of the end, because that's what blew everything out of the water. And eventually, through the investigations, that became the Iran-Contra scandal, because allegedly, the agency was supplying these people against the Boland Amendment. And so.
Gotcha. Well, going back to the camps, and you're inserted in all these places, the one thing that sticks out in my mind is the rape. When Suicide was killed, the 2 commanders, Krill and Kara, came into power. They raped a young lady and tied her up to a tree and killed the husband, or tied the husband to a tree, made him watch. I mean, horrible stuff. But what I was so impressed with was how you got these guys out to go face justice. That was dangerous.
Yeah, I got a phone call from my boss to come in, and I was taken down to the Sala Mayor of the Hondurans. and the Hondurans had gotten intelligence that these two guys had gone rogue. The majority of the camp was still loyal, legal kind of guys, but these two commanders, Krill and Caramalo, which means Caramalo means like rough face. You look like a tough guy, faccia brutta in Italian. And the Hondurans looked at me and says, "You're the guy in the camps. Fix it." So the first guy, Krill, we came down in a helicopter, and he met us just outside the camp. And I faked that I was feeling sick. So I told his bodyguard, this great big mulatto guy, 6 foot something, I said, "Can you go down to the town and get me, something for my stomach, including some Cokes and stuff like that?" Because, so of course, the Krill, he's got his gun, and he said, "Yeah, go ahead. I'm here with Rick." And I was there with another Nika and a Honduran captain.
Right.
So we had the authorities. And as soon as his bodyguard left, I grabbed him, threw him in the helicopter. Disarmed him, put him in the helicopter, and told him, "Look, I guarantee your safety, but you got to go answer not to the FDN, but to the Hondurans on what you guys allegedly been doing here." So I get him in the helicopter. Here comes the bodyguard. I said he decided he was going to go back to talk to the command, but don't worry, I'm staying here. The helicopter comes back tomorrow. So I go back to now they're walking me to the camp, and I'm walking around. I've been in this camp 1,000 times, so I knew the layout. And I'm walking around, and then from behind a bush, this guy says to me, he says, "Psst, psst, mi mayor, major, they're going to try to kill you tonight." Jeez. And this was a young kid who had come to me 3-4 months before and asked me for some money for his wife that was ill. And I went into my pocket. I gave him $20 worth of lempiras. And that $20 saved my life, because they indeed tried to get me that night. They usually used to put us in the center of the town, of the camp, for security. So the first clue was they put us at the edge of the camp. Luckily, right. There was a mountain behind there. And so as soon as it got dark, me and the other two guys, we came out the window, went up the stairs, set up. You can't just walk out. You're in the middle of triple canopy jungle with no, we didn't have GPS or special comms back then. So we just hunkered down, started loading. We had grenades, and we all had our firing lines and everything else. And around midnight, I could see the flashlights coming into the hooch, and them yelling and screaming and all pissed off because I wasn't there. The next morning, I just show up back in the camp like it was nothing. And
balls this big, man.
Well, the idea was they wanted to blame the Sandinistas. Mm-hmm. Their idea was that they were going to say the Sandinistas attacked the camp, and they took the Major Alex. And so I show up, and again, there were guys there who were friendly, so I had some much relieved looks. Others were looking at me like if looks could kill kind of stuff, because they were part of the clique. And then the last guy, Caramalo, was actually in town. He wasn't he wasn't at the camp. So we flew the helicopter to the town, and they had like 5 one-striper police guys with little rifles and stuff guarding the town. So these guys were running them up. They were confiscating cattle. They were cattle rustling, selling. So when we landed, I asked them, "Where's Caramalo?" And they go, "Oh, he's at the whorehouse with he's there drunk at the whorehouse." It's like 10 o'clock in the morning. So I told him, I sent him a message, said, "You need to come see me now." So he shows up with a Jeep and his bodyguard who was driving, and he walks out. He doesn't have his rifle. He has his pistol, but I had my AR slung and my Browning high power. And I start talking to him. Really, I mean, I trained all these guys. They knew me for before. And I looked at him and said, "Listen, you need to go back. Krill's already there. I guarantee your safety. Nobody's going to throw you out of the helicopter, but you do have some things to answer." So he started getting real, jittery, and he looks back at the driver, and the driver takes an Uzi out of the bottom of the seat. And as soon as he did that, I pointed my AR right at his balls, at Caramalo's balls, And I said, you know that if your guy even sneezes, I am going to blow your dick off.
You're never going to go to a whorehouse again.
He was
Yeah.
like, yeah, more whorehouses. So I disarmed them, put them in the helicopter, and they were both found guilty. They had incredible witnesses come up, and what you alluded to, yeah, they took one of these sub commanders that opposed them because of what they were doing. They tied him to a tree and they raped his wife in front of him. So they were. My understanding, I wasn't there, and I had nothing to do with that. But my understanding is that they did face a firing squad.
Didn't make it back. So now you got the camps back in working order, but you also had to deal with a mutiny in some.
Yeah, that was Mosquito. Yeah, unfortunately, people underestimate the propaganda capabilities of the communists have.
Yeah,
it's their biggest weapon. It really is, and they were fomenting trouble with the Mosquito Indians. That because the Mosquito Indians they don't consider themselves Nicaraguans. Okay, they are Native Americans. Mixed with black, with the slaves that washed ashore, this kind of stuff. And like I said, there's three main tribes, and there was a lot of Sandinista infiltration there, so they were fomenting trouble. Their leader of Misurasata, which was the Mosquito organization, Misura, Sumo, and Rama, was a guy named Stedman Faggoth. And about 600 of these guys came out, all gunned up, came over the border, back from the field, and they were going to confront Stedman because they had been led to believe that he was stealing from them, and that's why they weren't getting the supplies and all this other stuff. So we had a guy, but by that time we had somebody in the camp. He smartly got on the next plane and get the hell out of there.
Yeah.
Me, not so smartly, went to my boss and I said, I can turn this off. So I flew back in. I took my helicopter. I knew that Stedman was flying into Puerto Lempita and then had to drive to Roos, which was the camp where we were going to meet at. That was their headquarters. I went in a US-500 straight into the camp. And when Stedman arrived, that's one of those. When Stedman arrived, I told him what was going on. And he looked at me and says, and what the hell are you doing here? I said, this ain't happening on my watch. You stay put. I'll talk to these guys tonight. So I sent out a message. And again, these guys knew me. They knew that I could outshoot them, that I could outwalk them, and that they had respect for me, and I had built that.
Yeah.
So I come out. I'll never forget it. There was a fireplace thing going. They had a fogata going, and all these guys were around, and they got bandoliers and all this kind of nasty faces. I have my Browning high power. Why am I going to bring a rifle when there's 600 guys, right? So I macho my well out of this or don't. And I looked at the guys and I told them, I said, listen, first of all, I will tell you that you're wrong. But you are fighting for democracy. So if you and the rest of the Mosquitoes, not just you 600, because we had 3,000 some guys out there armed with the Mosquito, I said, if you vote Stedman Faggoth out, that's your prerogative. I said, but if you touch one hair of Stedman, I will personally lead the troops that go back out and kill you. And they looked at me. That was not one that they expected, because here's this guy with a Browning high power, and he's barking at us. But they knew that I did represent something greater than just Rick. And I promised them. I said, "Listen, I will prove to you that you were wrong. That you've been misled." And then I called Colonel Ray, and I had to even actually do it on open line communications, because the guy that was that left, he had taken the one-time pads. That's what we used to communicate. So I told my boss, Colonel Ray, I said, I don't care how you do it, but I need 2 airplane loads of food and ammo here by tomorrow morning, or you're going to need a new Alex out here, because they're going to hang my ass. And sure as hell, C-47s came in with all the ammo and everything else, and we turned that off. And to this day, I'm still in touch with Stedman Faggoth, and he remembers the fact that I saved his bacon.
Oh, no way. What is he doing now?
He's in Nicaragua, in the in the Mosquito, and still trying to do the same thing. He's still trying to resist, but they're in dire. They're being super sacrificed out there, and
Yeah.
they don't have a Contra program. I mean, they don't have anybody that can give them logistics and training and everything else. So they're just suffering the consequences.
So, so I guess your first 5 years of the agency, you were down Latin America. Now you get quote trained and you go to the farm, right?
Yeah.
For for greater things down the road. Um, is the farm anything like that movie with the Irish kid and Al Pacino?
Yeah, I know the one you're talking about. I can't remember the
Yeah,
name
yeah.
of it.
Is it anything like that at all? Or I mean, how is it? Is
You
it
know,
pretty?
Hollywood, and Hollywood will always misinterpret more things that sometimes out of malice, sometimes out of ignorance. But the farm is a place where you get totally immersed. You live the days that you're there. You are in a foreign station, working in learning tradecraft. You have classes in the morning on everything from surveillance detection route to secret writing, the photography, and all this kind of stuff. Agent handling, the recruitment cycle, spot assess, and so on. And then you do operations. I mean, you actually go meet agents and you go and meet contacts, and you got to recruit them, and you got to run them, and you got to write it up. And there's no other than the actual training. Everything else, you are in role. You are not allowed to get out of role. So you're there as what you are, and they are what they are, and
That's amazing.
it's very intense. I mean, you're talking 10, 12-hour days of classes and meetings and writing things up until midnight and then doing it again. So
Well, I'd always heard that part of the training graduation deal was to go over to London and go from point A to point B and avoid all the CCT cameras and stuff like that. Is that anything that you had ever had to do? Was go somewhere in
that
DC or something?
that might be the case now because but back then cameras was not the issue that they are now.
Yeah.
London until the Emiratis knocked them. They had the most cameras per capita anywhere in the world. No, we did our final exercises in a different city. I ended up going to Denver, and we're working against the FBI. The FBI is trying to catch us in the act, and we're through tradecraft eating their lunch, even though we were in their turf. And we had agent meetings, and people volunteer, and you had to do all this stuff again. But now you weren't working out of an embassy; you were TDY somewhere doing a station's job, and your cover was whatever it was.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. So, I mean, that's professional training. It's been around for a long time since Ray Donovan. What about what's going on right now? What do you think about the border and some of the bad actors, Iranians and Chinese that have probably made it across? Do you feel that there are cells out there?
Oh, look, I don't talk politics, but I do talk history and I do talk facts. Um, we know that there are cells in this country. I'll give you the perfect example. When 9/11 happened, I was the chief of operations at C.I.A.'s Counter Terrorism Center. Gopher Black was my boss. And right after 9/11, and I actually, a few years before, I started the Bin Laden Task Force. I was the deputy chief of station with Mike Scheuer, who was the chief of station. He was an analyst. We started the Bin Laden Task Force in January of '96.
Wow.
So fast forward to we're now in early 2001, and I am now the chief of operations of CTC. I got in there May. September was, of course, our attack, and we had the FBI counterparts come see us the following day. They wanted to see, and I knew the guy, Mike Rollins, a super good guy. He was the special agent in charge in DC for counterterrorism. And he came in to see me and Kofer, and we briefed him. I thought, we're 99% sure that it was Al Qaeda through Bin Laden and all this kind of stuff. And Mike says, "Thank God." And I looked at him and said, "Mike, what are you talking about? What do you mean, thank God?" He says, "Rick," he says, "if it had been the Iranians and we decided to retaliate, Hezbollah would bleed us in this country." This is 2001. This is before the border was what it is now, which is a total abortion. And I looked at him, I said, "Mike, I'm the chief of ops of the Counter Terrorism Center. This is the first time I hear about this." And he would have said, "Well, like this is, you guys don't operate in the United States." But it was a very telling thing. And he explained that the Hezbollah had cells in the United States that they were trying to watch, that their sole mission was if we had an issue with Iran, that they would bleed us. Fast forward to the situation that we have now, and you see what it's already happened in Europe, and we're headed way past that direction. I actually also, when I was chief of the Koreas, I compromise is the right word. Neutralize can be misconstrued. I neutralized 2 North Korean agents who were smuggling people into the United States to do their bidding. So this was 1998 when I was doing the Korea stuff. Yeah. So throughout, we've had this problem, and now it's exacerbated by the fact that you have hundreds and hundreds of thousands, millions of people coming across the border. And what people don't understand, if only 3% of those are bad guys,
yeah,
you do the math. You have tens of thousands of bad people in this country, and I guarantee you it's more than 3%, because there's also the criminal element that goes on above and beyond the infiltration of foreign nationals that are being sent in order to foment trouble in the United States. That's a given.
It's crazy. It's like The Americans, that TV show.
Yeah.
Bad guys, living the dream and waiting for the call.
That's it. All sleepers. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. I told you over the phone a while back. Growing up as a kid, I grew up in Arlington, Virginia, and directly across the street was Jack Downing, and I was good friends with his son JG and his daughter Wendy. And we just always knew Mr. Downing would all of a sudden have to go to Moscow, or he would go to Beijing, or he was always traveling, and he was the State Department, and it was just kind of funny. So great guy, incredible man, and they came back from, I think, Beijing, might have been Moscow tour, and they had sold their house across the street from us, and they bought another one right next door, about a block away. And the Washington Post outed him as the number 3 man at the CIA, number 3 guy, hid spy, lives on 16th Street in North Arlington by a church, and it's like, you just directed everybody to my house. And he was just this, quiet little suburban family. And I think they had to leave right there. But I loved it in your book because there was a part where you ran afoul with somebody they were trying to get you on something stupid. And it was Downing that came and had your back. So it made me feel good. And Godspeed to Mr. Downing.
First of all, Jack, I met him in the Philippines when I was the liaison guy and the liaison branch guy at the Philippine station, the Manila station. And he came and visited, and my boss, Ted Grohl, who unfortunately also passed away, great guy, was telling him, what we were doing, and it was very impressive because we were running, with all the police, the militaries there, the Navy, working the MPA and the Abu Sayyaf issue. And Jack looks at me and says, "Yeah, congratulations, you're doing a good job. When are you going to get a real job?" And I said, "Sir," he says, "Yeah. When are you going to?" Because I was ground branch. I was, I was a case officer, but I was still under the paramilitary umbrella.
Right.
And this is 1990. So he says, when are you going to get a real job? Like come to East Asia Division? And I had been thinking about it anyway, and I looked at him and I said, "Well, sir, what do I have to do?" He goes, "You just did." 2 days later, I was in East Asia Division, and obviously he was the division chief for East Asia. Eventually, he moved up to be the DDO, the director of operations for the agency. Indeed, the number 3 guy. Like I said earlier on, I touched on. I had a kind of stupid teenhood. I got along with the wrong crowd. We were always fighting and getting in trouble and stealing hubcaps and all this other crap. So I grew up with a rough bunch of crowd. I mean, of the guys that I grew up with, a third are dead, a third are done great, and the other third are cops. It was that kind of mixture. So one of those guys became a bigwig, and we were close. We were good friends. We used to work out together every day and all that other stuff. And when he got into deep trouble, somebody said, "Hey, if anybody knows about this guy's history, it's got to be Ric." So they tried to strong arm me into that, and it was a very tough year for me and my family. But Jack Downing stood by me. There was another legendary guy named Dick Holm. Dick Holm was a paramilitary case officer who suffered when he was doing the Congo stuff. His plane went down. He was the only survivor. He was badly burnt. And he was, I think, he's either European or one of the other divisions chiefs at the time. And those 2 guys are the ones that really went to bat for me at that time. And
Yeah, didn't you run into one of them in the elevator? And
say again?
didn't you run into one of them in the elevator? And
Yeah.
he,
That was Dick Holm. We were at the language center because I was studying an Asian language. I was studying Japanese, and went for my test. And when I had never met Dick Holm. I had no idea. But of course, he was very easily to spot in that his face is burned, his hands are burnt, and pretty badly. So I was sitting behind this guy, and I look, and I said, "Gee, that guy is. Could it be?" And then he gets up, and I look at his paper, and it said Dick H on it. We never put our last names on anything, so his Dick H was on his test paper. So I finished my stuff, and I waited for him at the elevator bank, and I love that guy. I mean, I always get a little choked up telling the story because he literally saved my bacon. When Jack Downing had the meeting with all the division chiefs and the heads of security that were going to vote up or down on Prado, Dick showed up and he raised his hand, and Jack says, "What's up?" He goes, "Sir, I got a lot of stuff to do. I don't have time for this bullshit." I read his file. "Can I vote first before the discussions?" And he gets up and he takes everybody had my file, it was about this thick, threw it on the desk, and he says, "I don't care if this guy did or didn't know what he do. We owe him. My vote is he stays." So, I mean, I love the guy. I mean, there's people I'd kill for him. I'd take a bullet for, and so he comes out of the testing area, and I'm waiting for him. I get up and I walk to him and says, "Excuse me, sir, are you Dick Holm?" He goes, "Yes, I am." He says, "Sir, you don't know me, but you did me a great favor at one time." And he says, "What was that?" I said, "Sir, my name is Ric Prado." He stood at attention and saluted me and said, "It is to meet you." That's the giants under whose shadows I walked throughout my career.
yeah,
I don't know any great agency officer who's not, or special forces or Marines or whatever, that are not first and foremost humble, because we all grow up trying to be guys like Dick Holm and Jack Downings and Ray Doty's. You know that from your own military experience. You have those people that forged their mettle as you were coming up the ranks.
yeah,
So
and that's thing, always paying it forward too, taking care of folks and mentoring them as well.
that's it.
So through your life, I know you had that. I did want to throw some of these photos up and just have you talk about it real quick because I
Good.
know I'm bumping up on an hour for you. But that
Yeah, it's
that
my
is a
favorite.
great, yeah, that's a great picture of you with the
Yeah, my Barracudas. Um,
barracudas.
Yeah, well, these were all Mosquito Indians. That's me on the far right there on the top. What happened was I met these guys in the Contra camps in the Mosquito side, and I was in Honduran uniform, so I had my scuba badge on my hat, and one of them came over to me and says, "Sir, you're a major. You're a military diver." I say, "Yeah, I'm a military diver." He says, "We're divers too," and he brought out these other four guys. Actually, they were like 6 or 7 of them, but he brought over the next four guys, and he said, "We're lobster divers," and and that I kept that in mind. I go, "Wow, that's really cool." Again, the Prado luck would have it. Not too much later, headquarters comes in with a requirement, says we need to do something to the Sandinistas that is a left hook. Says we've been harassing them. We're gaining territory. We're doing ambushes and raids, but we need them to understand that there's a bigger power here. So I came up with the idea of using these guys, had to train them up, to blow up Puerto Cabezas Pier. Puerto Cabezas is in the northeast side of Nicaragua, and that was the logistic belly button for receiving Soviet aid via Cuba into the Sandinistas. That's where all the military stuff came, including fuel and everything else. So I put these guys, all of them, through PT tests, and the four that made it through, I spent 3 weeks in a little island in the middle of the ocean, training these guys on compass swims and how to put these kind of bombs under the pier. Puerto Cabeza has a very, very long pier because it's fairly shallow and then it goes deep. So for the ships to come in, they have this very, very long pier. They have pipes that's where the oil would be dropped down. And then, of course, the massive logistics material was being brought in. So I took the guys out. We went out on a Honduran PT boat that took us out about, probably 10 miles outside of Nicaraguan waters. And we got on the water, and I launched my guys, and they put the bomb under the bridge, the pier, and we did it on purpose. Did it at night, not only for the cover of the darkness, but also we didn't want to kill civilians or people that were just working there.
Yeah.
So after midnight, I don't remember if it was 1 or 2, the bomb went off, and that port was neutralized for quite a while. And a few days later, I got they called me to the front office and they showed me overhead. It was the first time I've ever seen satellite overhead, and this big gaping hole. And I tell you, we felt great. But those Barracudas were tough kids, and they were dedicated. Yeah, very proud. I love that photo.
Yeah, 10 miles. How did you have those little torpedo swim pack things to get them out there? And
No, we had put in a wooden panga boat, which is native to the area, and being wood, it's also impervious to radar. And we had given the guys little IR lights, and the boat captain and myself had a vision that that we could see IR, and so no, they swam the last mile or so in. They went in the panga. Stopped the panga, they went out, and then they came back to us when we brought them back to the PT boat that was waiting out there, and we did him out and came back, and before daylight, we had a feeling we had scored. So yeah.
And you did two of those raids, if I remember right.
Well, that was the only one that was successful. The other one was more adventurous, and actually got me my first medal in the agency. What happened was they again, headquarters came back, and they wanted to do the same thing that we had done in Puerto Cabezas in Corinto. Corinto is now on the northwest side of on the Pacific side of Nicaragua. And I said, yeah, and they asked me, can your divers do it? I go, of course they can. This is what they do. So we started training them on limpet mines, these big ass mines. And what you have is Corinto. The port is here, and there's a big bridge that locks it into with a land, so they can shuffle the stuff. So the idea was to take out 4 or 5 of the pylons on one side, have the bridge topple over, and that'll take them years to circumvent that.
Sure.
Well, what happened was in the again, you cannot run operational military or intelligence operations through a political optic. Politics took over. And they said, well, the Mosquitos did the one in Puerto Cabezas. We need the regular Spaniards to also get credit because that's what's going to maintain the cohesion. And they're popular with this and they're popular with that. And I told them, I said, this isn't going to work because the Mosquitos do not trust the Spaniards. And the Spaniards don't trust the Mosquitos. It's a lifelong thing. It's just as oil and vinegar. They've always hated each other. They insisted. I saluted and I took my guys in. And they went in two very fast boats, so we had provided to them. They went in and they were almost at the entrance to the bridge when there was a lot of patrols. That the intelligence failed us on that there was a lot of patrolling going on. And they got in an argument between the boat captains who were Spaniards and the Mosquitos who were the divers. And the Mosquitos were telling them, he says, look, we know that we're going to go and be in the water. We're going to be gone for an hour. If you guys you're going to leave us. If you get comfortable, I know you're going to leave us. And they're going like, well, no, we're not. Yes, we are. You got guys that have bombs and grenades and all kinds of guns arguing with each other. So they decided to cancel the mission. Well, what happened was the boats were not seaworthy reliability wise. These were very fast boats. They could do, I don't remember if it was 50 knots, but they could haul ass. And they both broke down on the way out. And the first one crapped out and they went into the mangrove and hid there. The other ones made it up to the bay there and I'm thinking Gulf of Fonseca, the Gulf of Fonseca Bay there. They made it. They were still in Nicaraguan waters. Now they're dead in the water. They're just floating there like a cork.
Right.
So I was at a little island nearby that was controlled by the military, and I went to my boss or the guy that was the program manager for this, Leon Williamson, another great guy. And I told William, so I said, Leon, I ain't leaving my guys behind. And he says, well, I figured that. How are you going to do it? So I told him my plan and I executed my plan. What I did is I made some stable rigs out of rope. I had 6, because I wanted to get out myself. And I did a low and slow, helocast, what they call it now, but back then we call them low and slow. And I jumped in with fuel, water, a toolkit, spare spark plugs, my trusted Walther PPK in my ankle, and 2 pounds of C4, because if we could not get the boat started, I wasn't going to leave that behind. I was going to blow the boat. Yeah. So the Mosquitos, I landed. We were able to get the boat started and all this other stuff, and got the guys back to port. What happened was the spark plugs were totally fouled up, and we were able to put new spark on and crank back up, and we went back. That night, we went back to get the other boat. And this time there was a Cuban boat captain, a former Bay of Pigs veteran, was the boat captain, myself and an assistant of his that was also an American maritime guy. And we went back into the Nicaraguan waters trying to find the second boat so we could at least sink it and take the guys out. Well, because of the earlier in the day activities, the Sandinistas were out there in full force. They knew something had gone on, and so we had an airplane in the air that was providing us connectivity and comms and whatever intelligence they could, and we were vectoring in on the guys who were still in the mangrove area. Yeah, and they were there, and all of a sudden, the Sandinistas started popping flares in our direction. Luckily, this was like an open fisherman, so I had a very small footprint. And what they after the flares didn't reveal anything, they started doing recon by fire. They would fire in a particular area and hope that we were stupid enough to shoot back at them, and then they could vector in on us. Obviously, I had an AR-15 and a Browning, so I wasn't about to shoot anybody. Yeah. It got pretty hairy there for a while because they kept searching for us. We had to stop, and we had to back out. And then the next morning, we had a group of capability called the Piranhas. And these guys were on very, very fast little boats, armored up to the gills. So we had, I think it was 4 of them that we went back. And this time we went straight in, grabbed the boat, towed it out, and brought it back to safety. And they weren't going to mess with us. I mean, these guys had very heavy firepower on these boats.
Well, the first rescue was the one you jumped out of the helicopter 30 feet.
That's right.
You're crazy, man. That's awesome. And I bet they'd never seen anything like PJ jumping up 30 feet into the.
Funny, because I have later on in my Costa Rica years, I bumped into one of the divers who was now at the Southern Front, and they had a guy who was a painter, and I have it on my wall. I'll send you a picture of it. They did a depiction. He described the mission. So it had a helicopter. And by the way, low and slow is 15 knots, 15 feet or whatever. These were not pararescue pilots. These guys were great pilots, but they didn't do water well. So my jump was at least from 30. So anyway, they have the guys on the boat waving, at me, and they got the helicopter. And obviously, when you do a helocast, you jump out, you get real nice and tight, just like you do out of a static line, because you want to now land backwards. You got your mask around your neck, and you have your snork and fins on. And but in the photo, in the painting, they describe me as coming down, and it's like, the savior is coming to this thing. It was so cool. I have that here very prominent on my wall. Yeah, that was. But look, when you believe in what you're doing, and I'm a believer. And God has blessed you with a life that has forged your mettle as you go along. I was ready for anything, and I had the conviction that I was not going to leave my guys back there.
Yeah,
and I'm very proud of the fact that we got them all back.
You're a good commander. You really are. President Bush.
Yes,
signing.
That's me to his left. Then Kofor Black. Short story with that one is I was chief of liaison in Seoul when his father, the former president, visited, and I was in charge of the visit because I was the chief of liaison. I dealt with the local police and the local service and the 8th Army guys there. And at the end, President Bush told the Secret Service guys, "Hey, ask Prado if he wants an 8x10 photo signed by me and dedicated." And when the guys told me, I said, "No." I said, I bought a professional baseball because he used to use he had the baseball team at the time in Texas.
Yeah.
The Rangers. So he signed that ball for me. So that photograph that you're looking at there is 17 September, right after 9/11. This is when President Bush Jr. came in and he signed the lethal finding that allowed us to go out and start killing the people that had killed our fellow Americans. Oh. And very formal at the beginning, as you can see, we're always dressed up. And finally, I walk up to him, and I had told the Secret Service guy, "Hey, this is not a grenade in my pocket; it's a baseball," right? Because I knew the guys. So I walked over to him and I said, "Mr. President, do you recognize his signature?" And he looks at it and goes, "Of course." I said, "Would you mind adding yours to it?" And he goes, "Of course, not a problem." And he looks for his pen. He didn't have a pen, so that Mont Blanc is my pen that he's using. That's in my safe. That doesn't leave the safe. And he signed that. But the funny part, I didn't know this photo was taken at the time. But if you look at the photo, everybody's laughing. And in the back, right behind George Bush's head is Buzzy Krongard, who was the executive director at the agency. And he was a great friend of mine, big martial artist. We used to beat the crap out of each other, even though he was a lot older. And what he's saying is, leave it to a Cuban to bring a baseball to a presidential function. And that picture was taken. And I didn't even know it at the time. Yeah,
that's so awesome. I love this picture of you and the little bird.
That's Iraq. Those were during my Blackwater years. I did 3 deployments to Iraq with Eric. And we flew tail gun when we had to go somewhere, just like everybody else. So
yeah, Yeah, I did work with. I was at the embassy in Afghanistan, and we were PMA, political military affairs. But I did my whole thing was the Afghan National Police, and the dudes that would fly us around. We had the Russian helicopters with 3 pilots, and then we had the contract guys that were the crew chiefs and stuff like that. Took good care of us. Love those guys.
And
Love this shooting MP5s. Where was this?
this is actually a very cool thing. The CBS Sunday Morning Show did a piece on my book and on me that aired the day before the book um, actually was published. So it was published on a Monday, and this was on a Sunday. And they came down. They, the great interview, David Martin, in my house. But they also wanted to do some more kinetic stuff. The guy in the green in the background is a really good friend of mine. He owns a local gun shop, and he's a hell of a shooter. So that's an MP5 suppressed. And the exercise was we are in the car, and we have targets all over the place, and it's contact front. We get hit. We got 4 guys in the vehicle. My buddy there in green was the driver, myself riding shotgun. The 2 guys that are behind him there, one allegedly gets wounded. So we had to, right through the windshield, I fired the MP5 into the target to neutralize while my guys bailed out. I provided cover. We moved up to cover, and what one guy is doing is putting a tourniquet on the guy that's supposed to be wounded, while this guy and myself his name is Jason. Jason and I providing continuous support to the firefight,
Yeah.
and that's part of the videos. The interview is it's about 12 minutes long. It's a CBS Sunday Morning Show, and I froze that from the video. That's not a
Yeah.
photograph. That is actually a still of the video, and yeah.
Well, I
And
love
my friend still has that as a screensaver at the shop. Yeah.
I love the shot. I mean, you capture the recoil on his weapon. Love the 301st PJ hat. That's
Oh yeah.
bitchin', man. And then look at this. You got your own race car?
Yeah. This is. I have a very good friend of mine who's great humanitarian, but is also a very successful businessman. His name is Michael Fuchs. Fux. You could Google him. He's a hell. If you're a cop, kid, or military, this guy donates millions of dollars every year toward our causes. And I befriended him about 17 years ago. And when Black Ops came out, he sponsored a driver, Sage Karam, in the Indy series, and then now he was driving in NASCAR. So Michael came up with the idea of, for this particular race, which was in Charlotte, to pay for his car with the Black Ops logo. So I'm very proud of this, because I love my biggest passion is things with wheels and going fast, and to have not only my book, but my book, stenciled on a NASCAR. There ain't too many authors that can claim that one, I don't think.
No, not at all. What kind of knife do you have in your pocket there?
That's probably one of my Emersons. The kind that when you pull them, it opens up because you catch them on the edge of your pocket. I'm a nice guy.
I've always the Benchmade has always been one of my
Yep.
favorite. As a matter of fact, the books, when you send a book cover, I can't put it on to the deal, because the way Streamyard, it'll capture either a third of the top or the middle, and so I stuck it up on my mantle, and I put your book up there, and I'm like, he's got a knife on there, but it's kind of generic. He's got the American flag. Let me throw mine. So I threw mine up there. I hope you don't mind.
It's a beautiful knife. That's not a knife that I would ever carry. That was the publisher. I kept sending them photographs of the knives that I do use, and they came back, it's not enough quality. We came up with this one. See what you think. I said, all right.
You're like, all right, whatever. Hey, but it does have the American flag, so that's kind of cool.
Yeah, and well, I insist that was part of my idea too, to put the American flag on there. So yeah.
Well, Rick, sir, I've kept you for an hour and 20 minutes, and I can't thank you enough for your time. I'm serious as a heart attack. come to Texas. I'll buy you a steak, make a steak, or I'll cook a brisket for you, and drink some beer. I would love nothing more than to sit in the backyard around the pool at sunset, eating some brisket and hearing some more stories. But in the
It
meantime,
was
everybody, I know this has been around. When did this come out?
2 years ago. 2 years ago, February. It made New York Times bestseller list within a month. It was number 8 in the bestseller list, and it's done very well. We're right around 90,000 copies sold. So
Well, I
not too
tell you
bad.
what, I really enjoyed your book and I loved your life story.
Thank
The adventures you had down there, that was amazing. So, sir, thank you for what you've done for this country. I appreciate it, and I know there are a lot of people that don't know, but as soon as they read the book, they'll understand. And we need snake eaters like you that are out there in the jungle, willing to put their life on the line to better democracy. So, thank you so
you.
much.
Well, it's a real honor, a real pleasure, and this was a very unique interview because it's not everybody that interviews me has your background. You understand. You come from the same fraternities that we do. And like I mentioned to you before we got on the air, I thank you for what you do because you're carrying on these stories and raising topics that are essential for people to listen to. So you continue to serve doing what you're doing, and I appreciate it.
Oh man, I wish I could do more because I'm pressed for time. You know, it's between instructing new pilots how to fly a 737 or doing charity events or working on my Hummers. I don't have the time that these other podcasters do to make little reels and advertise. And besides, I don't care about the money. It's just it's it's fun. So I don't do it for the money at all, and I don't advertise, nor do I make the little reels to promote it more. But I am going to start doing some more stuff to try to get the word out, and hopefully more people can get on there. But thanks again, and if you stick around for 1 minute, I'll say
Yep.
goodbye to you. Hold on one
Yep.
second, all right?
Standing by.
Hey, folks, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed it. Seriously, grab this book, order it. I got mine off of Amazon. It is fantastic. My daughter always asks, how do you become a CIA agent? And I go, I think you probably just need to fill out an application to the Peace Corps, and then you'll get a phone call from somebody in a unlisted number up in D.C. But if you have an interest in working for our nation's finest, and you want to look at a job with the CIA, I worked with a lot of different people overseas, and we called them the skinny boys upstairs on the third deck in the embassy, and they were impressive as hell. So if you are interested in that profession, start reading this book, get an idea of what some of the stuff that they can do. Until then, I'll see you next week. Adios, hasta luego, sa wiedersehen, tschüss, sheshini, au revoir, domarigato gozaimasu, tano shinde kudasai, ciao, arrivederci, tashikor, assalamu alaikum, mahala, dovidzenia, das vidanya. Let's see, what am I going to end it on? I am going to end it on this one. You guys have a good night. Take care.